Late afternoon sunlight spilled a thin sheet of gold across the worn brick courtyard of Hope House Community Center. Children's laughter and shouts bounced off the old red tiles, mixing with the smell of fresh-baked cookies drifting in from the open doors. Staff bustled around, setting out small towers of pastries and chilled lemonade, the sweet scent of flowers from the fence line weaving through the air. From down the street came the low, velvety hum of an engine. Steady, measured, heads turned. A black sedan, its polished surface catching the sun like liquid glass, rolled through the gate and stopped by the entrance. Sunlight flashed off the hood, making people squint. The door opened, and Amara Lewis stepped out. Early 30s, poised, her warm brown skin glowing in the late sun. Her natural curls were swept up high, framing a face both delicate and strong. She carried a large gift bag wrapped in bright yellow paper and tied with a vivid red ribbon. The children spotted her instantly. "Miss Amara's here." Small feet thudded against the brick. They swarmed her, some tugging at her dress, others waving, one peeking shyly from behind a friend. Amara bent to greet each of them, her smile softening the elegance of her tailored clothes until she was simply Miss Amara, the one they waited for each month. Then the air shifted. Two men strode through the gate, one tall and broad-shouldered, his cropped hair and steel-edged stare cutting through the crowd. The other younger, compact, with eyes sharp and faintly mocking. Their dark blue uniforms were crisp, badges catching the sun. The tall one spoke first, voice flat, no greeting. "You're driving a reported stolen vehicle. You'll need to come with us." Laughter died. Leaves rustled in the sudden quiet. Amara blinked, startled, but steadied her tone. "There must be some mistake. This is my car. I have the papers." The younger officer's mouth curved, not into a smile but something colder. "A woman like you can afford a car like this?" The sentence hung in the air like a crack. Staff members stared. Whispers pricked the edges of the silence. Before she could answer, the tall officer was already moving, cuffs in hand. "Turn around." "Wait a second. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us." "Wait, Her protest broke as her arms were yanked back, cold metal biting into her wrists. The children froze, some clutching each other, others hiding behind staff. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Maybe all that money she brought wasn't clean. I heard her business made cash fast. Each word found her ears small, sharp cuts from voices that once greeted her warmly. One staff member hurried forward. "There must be a mistake," The younger officer blocked them with an outstretched arm. "Step aside. We're following procedure." They led her toward the gate, her footsteps dragging over the brick, eyes on the ground. Faces lined her path, curious, wary, pitying. The patrol car waited, white and blue. The back door swung open, and she was pushed inside. Through the glass, she caught one last glimpse of the courtyard. The staff, a few neighbors, the children huddled close together. The door slammed. The outside world vanished. The engine growled. The car pulled away from Hope House. Amara leaned back, cuffs still cold against her skin. The shame settled heavy in her chest, thick and bitter, as if she'd swallowed something she couldn't get down. Inside the cramped patrol car speeding through the streets, Amara sat in silence, her gaze fixed on the window. Present images overlapped with childhood memories, the ones she thought she had long left behind. Amara had been orphaned at 4. Her parents died in a car accident on a rainy night, leaving a small girl standing shivering in a police station until a social worker came to collect her. She was taken to Hope House, the community center everyone called the home for children no one comes for. Back then, Hope House was an old brick building, with dorm rooms crammed full of children. Amara often shared a bed with 2, sometimes 3, others. Meals were charity portions, sometimes just canned noodles and dry bread. Most of her clothes were donations, worn out, ill-fitting, but at least clean. Yet the lack of material comfort wasn't the worst part. More painful were the stares and words a black child had to endure. Some white children at the center often bullied her, hiding her belongings, cutting the hair of the only doll she owned, or throwing out slurs. Skin like coal means you're only fit to be a maid. You'll never be anything when you grow up. At first, Amara fought back, but each time she did, she was punished for starting fights. So she learned to grit her teeth, swallow her anger, and promise herself, I'll get out of here, and no one will ever define me by my skin color. At 16, Amara left Hope House. No family, no money. She stepped into the world like a bare-handed climber scaling a cliff. She worked any job she could find, waiting tables in fast food joints, cleaning motel rooms, selling goods on the street. Days were for earning money. Nights were for community college classes. Life was harsh. The pay was meager, and the contempt from customers or bosses was routine. But Amara persevered. She saved every dollar, studied while working, and eventually earned the grades and credentials to apply for a scholarship in business at a small university. 4 years later, she graduated. No one clapped except a few classmates, but to her, it was proof that a black orphan could still rise if she refused to quit. She started her first business with a tiny budget, a small shop selling recycled home decor. Using social media, Amara promoted products herself, made deliveries, and handled customers personally. Year after year, the shop grew, eventually becoming a company supplying eco-friendly interior goods to major hotels and restaurants. Once stable, Amara returned to Hope House, not as the poor girl with a plastic bag of second-hand clothes, but as a successful businesswoman. She donated a large sum, funded scholarships for orphans, bought bunk beds, renovated classrooms, and invited volunteer teachers to teach life skills. No one imagined that just months later, a storm would hit. Amara's arrest in front of Hope House spread online like wildfire. Within hours, images of her in handcuffs in the center's courtyard flooded social media and news sites. Headlines screaming, "Generous black businesswoman arrested for driving a stolen car." Is Amara Lewis's scholarship fund just a money laundering scheme? Rumors erupted. Comments under the articles split into two camps, but most doubted her. Told you getting rich that fast always means trouble. Definitely dirty money to polish her image. Her career and reputation, built over years, now stood on the edge. In the cold holding cell of the police station, Amara sat on a steel bench, outwardly calm. Inside, she felt waves rising and breaking. Other detainees recognized her from the news. A broad-shouldered man in the corner sneered, "CEO driving a stolen car? Black folks sure know how to put on a show." A woman with tangled hair and a faded hoodie cut in. "Probably money laundering. They're real good at pretending to be saints." A guard passed by, overheard, and smirked without a word. Amara didn't respond. She knew arguing would only make her look desperate. Instead, she kept her head slightly bowed, letting the baseless accusations wash past, though each word etched itself deep in her memory. When the flickering fluorescent light above her buzzed, Amara raised her head, eyes sharpening. She replayed the events in her mind, every detail, the officer's words, the timing of the stop, and the things that had happened in recent months. A strange pattern emerged. Too many pieces didn't fit for this to be a simple mistake. She drew a slow breath, straightened her back. She knew she had just stepped onto a different part of this story, and from that moment, Amara began to think seriously. This was no ordinary misunderstanding. The day of the preliminary hearing came faster than Amara expected. That morning, the sky hung heavy and gray, clouds swollen like they were holding back a storm. The street to the county courthouse was choked with cars and people. Local news crews had cameras set up at the gates, long black lenses trained on anyone who passed. The courtroom doors swung open. 2 officers escorted Amara in. She wore the prison jumpsuit, the cuffs marks still faintly visible on her wrists. Her steps were steady, chin lifted, eyes hard, though anyone looking close would catch the quiet tension beneath. Every seat in the gallery was full. A few familiar faces from Hope House sat pressed into a corner, their eyes a mix of worry and confusion. Across the aisle, reporters aimed their cameras, flashes popping like tiny explosions. The gavel cracked. The judge, a silver-haired man with a calm, measured voice, announced the session open. The prosecutor rose, straightened his tie, voice ringing out. "Your Honor, this case is a textbook example of property theft. The vehicle driven by the defendant, Amara Lewis, matches the license plate of a car reported stolen. Records from the DMV confirm this. The rightful owner has chosen to remain anonymous, fearing potential retaliation. He paused, sweeping the room with his gaze before continuing. We request that the court hold the defendant in custody and impound the vehicle during the investigation. Given the severity of the offense and the risk of flight or evidence destruction, we believe this is necessary. A low ripple moved through the gallery. Eyes turned toward Amara with an air of quiet verdict. She sat still, hands clasped on the table. She knew that if nothing changed here, everything, her company, her reputation, the trust she had built, would collapse. The judge lowered his eyes to the file. The gavel lifted slightly. Then the courtroom doors burst open. Footsteps echoed across the tile. A tall, lean black man in a gray suit strode forward, clutching a thick file tied with cord. Nathan Cole, Amara's loyal assistant since her earliest days in business. "Apologies for the interruption, Your Honor," Nathan said, bowing his head slightly. "I have new evidence directly related to this case, and I request to present it immediately." The judge's brows knit. He motioned him forward. Nathan set the file on the table, untied it, and began laying out documents. His voice was clear and firm. 2 weeks before her arrest, Ms. Lewis's license plate information was altered in the DMV system. This was done by an employee who accepted a bribe from Richard Hale, a white businessman who has repeatedly tried and failed to acquire Ms. Lewis's company. A murmur rolled through the room. The name Richard Hale was well known. Head of a large furniture conglomerate, infamous for ruthless tactics. Nathan kept going, page after page. "We have system access logs showing this employee's ID, logging in and editing the plate data. We have bank records of the bribe, along with messages between Hale and the employee, detailing exactly how to make Miss Lewis's car appear stolen." The prosecutor shot up with a protest, but the judge raised a hand. "Let me see everything." Amara looked at Nathan. A spark lit her eyes. She remembered the sleepless nights in jail, turning the recent events over in her mind. It couldn't have been coincidence, especially not after Hale's veiled threats when she refused to sell. "You'll regret this." During one brief visitation, she'd told Nathan everything, names of officials who'd contacted the company, the ones she circled as suspicious, and how Hale might move against her. Nathan had understood. In days, he'd traced the trail, calling in favors from contacts in tech and law. Piece by piece, the puzzle took shape, exactly as Amara suspected. When the picture was complete, he'd chosen the perfect moment to bring it forward. The judge turned each page, his frown deepening. At last, he looked up, voice firm. "This evidence strongly indicates a deliberate attempt to frame and harm the defendant. I order the immediate release of Amara Lewis and the launch of an urgent investigation into Richard Hale and all involved parties." The room erupted. Reporters rushed for the doors, phones pressed to their ears. Cameras flashed toward Amara and Nathan. Amara exhaled, her shoulders loosening. Nathan gave her a small nod, as if to say, "We did it." The cuffs came off. Amara stood, straightened, and scanned the room. Minutes ago, most eyes here had looked at her like she was already condemned. Now, some held discomfort, even guilt. As she stepped out, she caught snippets from the press. Breaking story. A corporate setup, full scale. Richard Hale's finished. Outside, autumn air brushed cool against her skin. Amara lifted her head and drew a long, steady breath. This wasn't over, but she had her freedom back. And now, the truth was starting to surface. In the grand room bathed in the golden glow of crystal chandeliers, the soft chime of clinking glasses mingled with the deep laughter of men in tailored suits. At the center sat Richard Hale, a white man in his early 50s, salt and pepper hair immaculately combed, leaning back in a leather armchair imported from Italy. Before him, a polished walnut table gleamed, set with red wine and thick stacks of documents. Richard raised his glass. Eyes sweeping over the subordinates gathered around. His voice was smooth, brimming with confidence. "Just a few more weeks, and that black girl's company will be ours. The board will lose patience with the scandal. They'll sell cheap just to save face." Laughter rippled around the table. One man added, We've already drawn up the restructuring plan. There won't be a trace of the name Amara Lewis." Richard smirked, took a slow sip, eyes glinting with the satisfaction of a man convinced he owned the board. But then the sharp wail of police sirens cut through the air outside, urgent and unrelenting. Before anyone could react, footsteps pounded against the marble floor. The great double doors flew open. A squad of uniformed officers marched in, led by a black-coated senior officer holding a sheet of paper. His voice rang with authority. "Richard Hale, you are under arrest for bribery, falsifying state records, defamation, and obstruction of justice." The room froze. Richard shot to his feet, color draining from his face. This is some kind of..." He never finished. Two officers stepped in, turned him around, and the cold click of handcuffs sealed the moment. His subordinates stood in stunned silence, some edging toward the wall, others discreetly raising their phones to record. Outside, dozens of reporters waited, cameras flashing as Richard was let out. Questions flew over the roar of shutters, cameras flashing as Richard was let out. "Mr. Hale, any comment on the bribery charges? Did you try to frame Amara Lewis to take her company?" Richard kept his head down as they pushed him into the police car. The door slammed shut, sirens wailed, and the false glow he'd wrapped around himself was gone. When Amara returned to Hope House, the sky was clear and bright. The green-painted iron gates stood open, and familiar faces poured out to meet her. Staff and children filled the courtyard. The kids rushed forward, some hugging her waist, others clinging to her sleeves. "We always believed in you, Amara. Thank you for coming back," one staff member said, voice trembling. Amara smiled, her eyes glistening. She turned to Nathan, standing a step behind in his white shirt, his briefcase tucked under one arm as always. "Nathan," she said softly, full of gratitude, "if it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened." He shook his head. "You taught me never to give up. I only did what we both believed was right." They shook hands, firm and resolute, a promise to keep fighting for the values they stood for. The media covered Richard Hale's arrest relentlessly, but they also told Amara's story, how an orphaned girl, once bullied, rose to become a successful entrepreneur, only to be targeted in a calculated smear campaign. News outlets called it a landmark stand against defamation and discrimination. TV shows invited her to speak about surviving crises, and Amara did more than tell her story. She launched the Justice Light Foundation, a nonprofit supporting orphans and young entrepreneurs. Its flagship program offered free legal aid to vulnerable people wrongfully accused or targeted by prejudice. "No one should have to stand alone in court just because they're poor or different," she declared at the foundation's launch. "Truth will always have value, and justice exists only if we dare to protect it." One afternoon, Amara returned to Hope House again, not as the center of a scandal, but as the leader of a mission. The moment she stepped into the courtyard, the children swarmed her, their small arms wrapping around her. Laughter filled the air, mingling with the rustle of leaves in the wind. Amara bent down, embracing them all. Her eyes no longer carried the weariness of her days in prison, nor the shadow of doubt. Only a steady, unshakable resolve. "We're going to build a fairer future together." And in that moment, Hope House once again became the place where every hope began. Message. Amara's story is not just a journey to clear her name, it is proof that the truth can be buried, but it never disappears if someone is determined enough to dig it back up. From an orphan child looked down upon, she became a successful businesswoman, only to be dragged into the depths by prejudice and greed. Yet she rose again, not only to save herself, but to clear a path for others to avoid the same tragedy. Justice does not always come from grand courtrooms, but from the courage of those willing to speak the truth. And when we turn our own pain into a shared strength, we not only reclaim our freedom, we plant hope for a fairer society.